Hello and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any grand law statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, we love seeing you live every Thursday night in Facebook and YouTube land. Chats are always fun, and remember, your chat may show up in the show. And if you can't catch us live, catch us on the replay or in your favorite podcasting app. You know me, John Ruart, past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up, Joe Martinez. Hey, Joe.
Oh, hello. Hello and good evening. I am Joe Martinez. Yes, what do I do? I am past master of Manassas Lodge, number 182 in good old Manassas, Virginia. And yeah, super jazzed about tonight's show.
Super jazzed to have you. You're awfully glad to be here.
I am. Awesome. Damn glad.
Oh, there we go. Robert Johnson, hello and good evening.
Hello and good evening. Robert Johnson, past master Waukegan 78 and Spasnovum 1183 in the great jurisdiction of Illinois. Good to see you.
That's a great jurisdiction. Awesome. You know who else is great?
Who?
Jason Richards.
Yes, he is.
What's up, Ward?
Hey, Jason Richards, past master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, ignoring the commentary from the Peanut Gallery, and also member of Lafayette Lodge number 79 in Zanesville, Ohio, who will be celebrating its bicentennial here in 2 weeks.
Ooh.
Nice.
Are you going?
I am.
Ooh.
Nice.
Nice.
And last but not least, special guest for tonight, brother Chuck Dunning. As always, glad to see you.
It's good to be here. Chuck Dunning. I'm a Mason too, and I hang out in Texas and Oklahoma.
That was much for joy.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Let's pay some bills first. Give a shout out to patrons who support the show. You guys are amazing. Thank you for keeping the show going for
And gals.
years. Guys in the generic sense, not in the literal sense.
We can't do that anymore. It's 2026. You got to talk about all the peoples.
Fix it. Do better.
No, that was like 2024.
Be the change.
Be the change.
Be the change.
You know what also is changing? Esotericon. That's coming up.
Yeah.
Esotericon is not changing.
No, it's coming. We have a multi-year Esotericon alumnus with us tonight. He's been to quite a few. Yep, we won't bore you with all the details, but right now we are 85% sold out of our in-person tickets. There are only a few tickets left, and we cap so that we do not fill the room, so everybody has room to spread and be esoteric and love one another with the proper amount of personal space. So only a few tickets left.
I'm going to put Chuck on the spot. What would be a one-sentence summary of the Esotericons you've been to in the past?
Okay. I would say that it is a gathering of the most committed esotericists in the Masonic family, plus esotericists outside the Masonic family coming together for the purposes of networking and more light.
Boom.
Love it.
Put that on a business card. I like that.
Put it on our website. Let's get a testimonial from Chuck Dunning on the website.
All right. Moving on to everyone's favorite segment of the show, especially Joe's. It is the tarot card of the week.
Tarot card of the week.
Never guessed it. So, what have we got for tonight?
Tonight, in honor of founder-ish of Martinism, we have the Tarot de Papis.
Ooh, that's big.
1909.
Yep. So, Papus wrote a book on tarot, the Tarot of the Bohemians. This was essentially a reprinting of the deck that he created for that book. And the cards are so big that I am having trouble shuffling them, so I threw them out on the floor and picked one up at random. And we have tonight the Seven of Wands.
Hmm.
Ooh, the Seven of Wands. What have we got written around there? Conversation. What else we got?
Courage,
Mhm.
resilience.
Yeah, this.
Reversed, you have indecision.
Okay.
Boo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with this, the
We've got a nice
wands.
little pentacle on the back.
Hmm. I love it.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
The mid wands are very conflict oriented wands. A lot of stick fighting, but also perseverance.
Yeah. Yeah. Protection.
Mhm.
Some cases. Yeah, I've seen this card come up quite a few times with people that we're working with, and for a lot of them, they just interpret it as kind of like headwinds, to say in the business sense. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Challenges.
Love it.
So there you go.
Great.
Stick to itiveness. Let's do that.
Stick.
Stick to
Want
itiveness.
to itedness.
Nice. All right. Well, let's segue into the topic of tonight. I'm very excited because what if I were to tell you that there was an initiatic order focused on Christian mysticism? It has been no surprise.
It's called SRICF.
Oh, yeah. Sort of, but not really. Yeah, you're not wrong, but you're not right either, because we've talked
Technically
about
correct, which is the best kind of correct.
Thank you, Futurama. Yes, we've talked in the past about our love for Christian mysticism as far as going deeper into our own spiritual faith, where we started out as Masons. Many of us started out as Masons and grew deeper in our faith because of the journey that it took us upon reflection and introspection. And so we're going to talk about really a non-Masonic order that would still be comfortable and would be you'd be familiar if you're a Mason that wanted to join this side order. So we're going to talk about the Martinist tradition, where it came from, a little bit of history, but more importantly, like how it's similar and how it's different than some of the Masonic groups that you may or may not have joined. And so this will be a fun journey, and we'll talk a little bit about why we brought Brother Chuck on. So why don't we just get right to that point? What do you know about Martinism, Brother Chuck?
Well, I've been a Martinist for over 20 years now. I ran my own chapter for a while, and I am currently Grand Orator for the Order Martinist in the USA.
All right. So Grand Order, that means certainly hanging at the Grand Council level, a big title.
Yeah.
What would you say you do here?
Well, Grand Orator is a nice way of saying Grand Blowhard. So they got the right guy for that.
They got it so right, Chuck. Let me tell you.
For life.
My role is I'm the Chief Education Officer for the USA.
Nice. Well, it's certainly glad to have you here. Another thing that I wanted to kind of publicly say that also I'm in the same lineage as Brother Chuck here, and I am currently the initiator, kind of the worshipful master equivalent of the group Shekinah in Virginia. So it's been an amazing journey so far. I'm digging it. I'm loving every step along the way, and then we'll talk more about how it's organized and all that. So where do we want to start? Brother Chuck, why don't you give us just a brief overview? If you're explaining it to a person on the street, what is the Martinist order? What is Martinism? What would they expect to see? How would they see it operate?
Yeah. So first off, I would say that it is a society that has a lot of similarities to Freemasonry, or even the Knights of Columbus. So it is a fraternal structure, and it has a set of initiatic stages that we refer to as degrees or grades, depending on order. And and so a person, if they're interested, they can get to know us, come to some of our public meetings, ask questions, and then and what they'll see is that it functions in this same kind of fraternal way that Freemasonry does. Um, some of the important differences I think in that regard, and I'm saying this especially for Joe and his followers, is we don't have green beans in Martinism. And
What? Well,
yeah,
put that on a bumper sticker.
So great. So great.
yeah. So I think that's the initial upfront explanation without getting too deep into, how the organizational structure is laid out and what we do on a routine basis.
Awesome. That's good. I think another thing just to highlight right up front too, that's another big difference that you would see is it is a co-ed order. It has been for a
Yes.
very long time. So men and women are allowed to join if they so choose to.
Yes, and importantly, I think many Martinist orders, and ours among them, are open to non-Christians. You don't have to be a Christian. Our language and symbolism is Christian, and we work within that model. And so a person needs to be comfortable working within that model. But the interpretations that they make within themselves or that they voice when that time comes, that's totally up to them, and we welcome that.
Which is a fabulous nuance. Jason?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think I've said this on a number of past shows where I kind of view religion as just a interchangeable set of lenses through which you view your relationship with God. And so it seems to me like Martinism, has that Christian lens on it, but it's you can kind of swap that out, and it's almost archetypal, right? Like Jesus or Christ is the archetype. Go ahead, Chuck.
What you're saying is very much in line with the founder of our order, Papoose, Gerard Oncoffs. That was very much his philosophy, and we find that over and over again in Martinist literature that's particularly connected with him and our lineage. So yeah, absolutely. We respect all religions as avenues to truth.
Very nice. Joe, you're going to jump in?
Yeah, I think Chuck touched on most of it, but yeah, that's how I've always viewed the difference between Martinism and Freemasonry. Freemasonry, the trappings for us, the archetypes that Jason was talking about are more the story of the Temple of Solomon and the people who built it, right? That's our framework in which we live. And, the sectarian, the not sectarian nature of Martinism for me has always been the language of Christian mysticism. For me is that framework in which we live and work and things like that. I am also, if you haven't guessed, a Martinist as well. And I am in the same group as John and in the same order as John and Chuck. So, but that's how I've always viewed it. Like that's the vessel by which we learn those things, right? And there's so many other differences between Freemasonry and Martinism that I hope Chuck touches on them.
Awesome. So let's rewind a little bit and go even further back. Some of the influences to what we know as Martinism today really starts with this Christian mysticism bent. And I think we really have to start at the beginning, which would go as far back as the late 1500s, early 1600s, right? With Jacoboma being a clear influence on Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin. But before we get to him, Jason, I know, did some research on Jacoboma for his SRICF college. So
yeah,
give us a summary.
So Jacoboma was incredibly interesting story. He was a cobbler, like he was a shoemaker peasant who had essentially an ecstatic experience where he just had a bunch of visions come on one day while he was walking in the fields. And And so, at age like 40, after he had an entire career, had multiple children, he embarked on this mystical and kind of erudite scholarly journey. He spent a lot of time in Görlitz, learning from the local Christian orders, and essentially he had a series of visions where he kind of found himself at one with the universe. And he says, badly paraphrased, but in the space of a quarter of an hour, he learned more than he could have learned at many years of study, at a university. And he didn't start writing right away. There was a period of about 12 years between when he had these, ecstatic visions and when he actually started to write his thoughts down. His first major work was Aurora, which was very much, I'm dumbing it down a little bit too much, but I see it as a love letter to Neoplatonism. There's a lot there on the one and unity, but he treats God as a living, self-revealing process. And so I think Burma is one of the inspirations probably of Richard Rohr in his Universal Christ. Burma talks about the necessity of opposition. So for creation to occur, you must have the clash of opposites. And so he doesn't treat opposition as a bad thing or conflict as a bad thing. It says it is necessary for this continual creation and renewal. He talks about, three worlds: the world of divine light, the dark world of nature and fire, and the external visible worlds. Again, he was a later contemporary of Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. And so Agrippa had his three worlds construct in his 3 books of occult philosophy. And then Burma also spent a lot of time writing about the fall. And so he was keenly interested in the fall of man and the fall from perfection. And so Burma kind of reframes that fall of mankind as like not an introduction of this foreign, heretofore unknown concept known as evil, but instead the fall is a misalignment of will. And so when you have creation turning its will away from creator, that is where that disconnect and that break and fall from grace happens. However, there is a way for salvation around inward kind of renewal and regeneration. And so there's a lot of introspection and working on yourself to realign your will with the creator to bring about your salvation. And so to Burma, salvation wasn't this this one time sanctification or blood payment, right? It was a continual renewal of your inner nature to bring yourself back into alignment with the creator. Yeah, Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Hi. I had a question for Chuck based on something really important that you said. That's really important to the framework of Martinism. So, Chuck, I was going to ask you, can you explain for those who are not Martinists what our ideology is and what our thoughts are and why it's so important to distinguish the fall, right, or the concept of the fall from grace, or however you want to frame it, as that vehicle that we use, right? Because it's very different than Masonic initiation, right? Like we really delve deep into this concept of our fall as one type of being into another type of being. So I'm sure folks would love to know.
Yeah. I think this is a vital point to understanding the Martinist tradition. And Jason, hit a very important point in there when he started talking about regeneration. In Martinism, we talk a lot about reintegration. The word regeneration also gets used. Saint Martin was interested in both of those as well as reconciliation. And essentially, what we say is that the myth of the fall or the legend of the fall describes a state or a condition in which we experience our separateness from God. And how each of us interprets that can be different, but it addresses the reality that everybody experiences, and that is, what is God? Where is God? How can I know God? How can I experience God? Why don't I know or experience God more immediately than I'd like to? You know, those things point to something. And in the myth of the fall, we say there was something that happened in the process of creation and the manifestation of creation, where, to use what Jason was just saying, somehow our attention got diverted away. And we could no longer participate in creation with awareness that it's all God and we're everything that is a manifestation of all of the possibilities that can flow out of that divine creativity, and to be one with all of that. And so that's one of the major differences philosophically between us and Freemasonry. In Freemasonry, the idea is focused on how can I become a better human being, which is definitely resonant with Martinism. But Freemasonry doesn't really address why it is or encourage us to meditate and contemplate on how it is that we are experiencing this separation and what to do about it.
Well
Thank
said.
you.
All right. So deeply influential person for sure, and setting up that framework. Let's fast forward a bit into the mid to late 18th century, 1743. Two gentlemen, one by the name of Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, which Martinist Order was named after, was born. And shortly, also the birth of Jean-Baptiste Willermoz. So it was around the same time. As Saint Martin was growing up, he was deeply influenced by Jakob Boehme's writing, learned German just to read it in the original German, and then worked with Pasqually, who's another gentleman who was forming his own organization around, and doctrine around the fall and reintegration, to create this organization called the Elocoans, or the elect priests. If you've heard that before, you've heard the Elu term used in Scottish Rite, for example, all kind of different versions of that story, and has evolved into even some more modern orders like Rectified Scottish Rite and CBCS. But St. Martin joined Pasqually's Elocoans organization, and it was a magical order. It was one that was definitely about theurgic. We're going to do some magic. We're going to do strict ritual to invoke the divine to come down and do some really cool stuff while we're there, while we're bringing him into our house. And he was digging it for a while. But he eventually, he being Saint Martin, decided to actually take a step back and said, you know what, that may work for you, but really it's more of an inward process than an outward process. That was his philosophy, that we need to focus on how can I center myself through meditation, through prayer, and through action to actually turn this from an external process into an internal change, which he then shortly, dubbed later the cardiac path, or the path of the heart, right? Which definitely is a good metaphor for that transformation that one should be doing. This is Saint Martin's philosophy.
Was
go
it
ahead.
Saint Martin who dubbed it the cardiac path, or was that Papeus?
Depends on what source you read. So
Okay.
I've heard
I
both.
think it was popularized by Papeus.
Yeah. Right. So 1803, Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin dies, and after his death, manuscripts are circled all around and published. Little small circles of Saint Martinists were really starting to spring up, but it was not organized whatsoever. And by the way, I mean, this is just like early Freemasonry. It was not structured and recognized like the way we have the bureaucratic layer over Freemasonry today. Freemasonry back then was still very loose, and I'm just going to go stand up a new lodge. Same thing is true for Martinism. I'm just going to stand up a new organization.
I think when you look at Martinism as a whole, like from an objective historical point of view, you've really got a series of what I would call, like, not in the sense that the teachings are dead, but like the organizations themselves are dead. And then there's the living transmissions that still exist today. You've got those original pieces that are coming out of the 18th century. One thing initially sets off 3 different orders, and then each one of those splintered into different things. The one that comes the farthest, I think, ends up being the Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin. So it's a terrible diagram that I made, but to help you kind of digest all of the different places. Like if you start off with that Masonic high degree system from Martinez de Pasqually, that's what starts it, from my research anyway. That just really explodes everywhere until you go down to the living traditions that are out, right? Which that's where you see Girard or Pappas, right? And Augustin Chabousseau.
Right. So again, Saint Martin dies in 1803. 1865, we have the birth of Gerard Ancos, or his mystical name Papus, in Spain. He becomes a French physician and a leading occultist, loves all the things. Sort of a Freemason, because he was kind of involved in all sorts of crazy stuff. I don't know if you consider him even regular by modern standards, but he certainly collected all the things and was in all the different things. It was
he wrote on Freemasonry, I believe.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I don't think he was terribly positive in his writings on it.
Well, you see that kind of viewpoint comes from a lot of, I think, esoteric writers. And in fact, I think that what you're referencing, Jason, is it's interesting because you see the same sort of, I don't want to say degrading, right? But I want to say like sort of maybe saying they've lost their way or they're not quite there. You see the same thing from guys
Don't
like
walk the walk, right?
Yeah, like A.E. Waite's forever to join Masonry. When he finally does, he's incredibly disappointed, and he literally never says anything great. But he loves using that Senior Grand Warden honorary title. So, but yeah, like, I just think that we see that from very adept spiritual individuals. And it just, I think that's just the nature of the beast sometimes, is to look at those things at a somewhat critical level. Because why are you a Martinist? Why are you a Freemason? And I think, you do both, but maybe Masonry can also be very materialistic. Whereas I don't think Martinism focuses on that at all.
Right, exactly. It's a big difference. One thing I want to highlight here, again, without going into gory history, is that Papus actually founds a mystical group, which he calls the Order Martinist, initially informal, drawing on transmissions that he believes came from Saint Martin's lineage. This is where we get the modern version of the Martinist Order, right? This is not founded by Saint Martin, but certainly influenced. And Papu says, you know what? Let's do a thing. Let's actually instantiate this organization. And then he dies. So he founds it, a Supreme Council of the Martinist Order, which firmly gets established in around 1890, 1891, composed of about 21 members. Papus is elected Grand Master and President, but by 1916, World War I is going on, and he dies while serving as a physician in the French army.
Tuberculosis.
Yeah, that's a heck of a way to go.
We lost so many to the consumption. It's bad news.
He actually I have a collection of his writings from the year or two before he passed.
Really?
And they're really, really interesting. They are very much, it's almost like a memoir type of introspection on just like death and life and what it all means.
Yeah.
I'll try to find the name of it.
So right before he dies, still active in Memphis Mizraim, as you saw in the chat, in the Kabbalistic Order of the Rose Croix, or the Rosy Cross. Again, this guy.
You say Rose Croix?
Yeah, like LaCroix. It's the drink, right?
Yeah, you could make like a terrible joke, like, LaCroix. LaCroix like is flavored, but really isn't what it says it is. Just like the Rose Croix. It's flavored like Rosicrucianism, but really isn't. All right, I digress.
So to bring it home, right? Papus dies. Now what? How do you pick up the pieces? And this is where the Martinist Order starts to really fragment in its modern sense. Not going to get into the gory history, but as you can see, some of Robert's notes here is that people who were initiators became these things called free initiators, where they just went off and did their thing. They were, they came from the same source, but yet, it started to diverge in lineage. And so over the past century, in the 1900s, we were trying to figure out how to reorganize. And so some groups merged back together, some remained true to lineage, and it became this whole thing. So the big takeaway there is that there still exists today different lineages that call themselves Martinists. And we're not here to say which one's right or which one's wrong. It's because it's more about the spiritual journey that one is on. And but there is more organization, because Papus's son actually picked up the torch in the 1950s to actually say, okay, let's reorganize this thing, let's get this thing back on track, and started to carry that through. I think I actually have a diagram for at least for the Order Martinist. This is the lineage, and you can see Philip Uncas that shows up here in the 50s and 70s to keep that tradition going through that lineage.
You got to admire just the fact that there are so many, I'm sure, Masons, it's a primary audience, watching this thinking, I wish my son had joined, or something along those lines. And so many of us have kids who may or may not ever be interested in Masonry, but to pick up as something as serious as what Martinism is for, and then to carry that on as a living tradition passed from father to son is pretty amazing, considering, it's not so out of character with something like maybe evangelical Christianity throughout the United States or whatever. Families pass these things on, and men take up the call to spread the good news. But with these sort of occult orders, you don't always see that. And so I think this is rather extraordinary and something that should be called out.
I mean, yeah,
the book, by the way, is Exegesis of the Soul, 3 treatises on the nature, origin, and destiny of the human soul.
Nice. Thank you. So that brings us to the modern times. It's still exists. It's in a much smaller form than let's just say mainstream Freemasonry to compare it to. So let's go deeper again. We've talked about what it is. Brother Chuck, why don't you give us a little bit deeper layer of what do we believe? What do we, what values does the organization have? How does it compare? How would you compare and contrast it to what Masons know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think let's just start with some commonalities in terms of philosophy and values. So in Martinism, we value the virtues in much the same way that is done in Freemasonry. We don't point them out exactly the same way as they're done in Freemasonry, but if you take a careful listen to our ritual, which you have to be initiated to do, you can definitely hear the repetition of certain virtues coming up as really key to this process of reconciliation, regeneration, and reintegration. We have a degree structure of 3 degrees, like we do in Blue Lodge Masonry. One of the differences here between Martinism, certainly in our order, versus the way Masonry typically runs in the Blue Lodge, is that it's not just about a matter of time and maybe memorizing some things before you can take the next degree. You actually have to demonstrate some competence and some commitment to the Martinist tradition.
So no blue lightnings, right? You get it all done
one
in
day, one-day classes.
One-day classes.
No one-day classes. And this kind of varies a bit from order to order, and even within an order from group to group or initiator to initiator, about what exactly the requirements are. But the idea is, are you taking this seriously? Is it something that's more than just a curiosity for you? Is it something that's more than just a social experience for you? Are you looking to get some sort of benefit for your spiritual life, as well as then the life that you live in the world that flows out of that inner spiritual core, which we would refer to as the heart? We always draw attention to the heart. And there are good reasons for that we'll get into later. But and that has already been touched on in different ways. But Saint-Martin, we look to Saint-Martin for a lot of inspiration on this. It's been pointed out that he chose a different path from his first teacher, Martinez de Pasqually. Saint-Martin discovered that this inner process of connecting with God, the contemplative way, the meditative, prayerful way, was actually more effective for him in making that connection with the divine and being transformed by that than doing all of the ceremonial, what I would refer to as external theurgical work, right? Not to say that people who practice external theurgy don't do internal things too.
Sure.
But his focus was clearly on the internal. In his correspondences, there's a collection of letters called Theosophic Correspondences. He talks about how that external way can be powerful and generate really significant results. But in order for that to happen, you've got to be a true master. And he laments that he doesn't even know one. Now, this is Saint-Martin, a student of Pasqually, who says he doesn't even know one who can do what that path promises. Yeah, that's a big ouch.
Maybe he just has a high bar.
Well, yes, he does. He does have a high bar. He says that his aim, the only initiation that he seeks and that he preaches, is that by which we can enter into the heart of God and have the heart of God enter into us. Nothing else comes higher than that for Saint-Martin. And the most direct way to do that is by turning within to connect with that spiritual essence that we were endowed with by our Creator, the breath of the Creator that makes us one with the Creator, or the spark in other language, in other symbolic terms. And so that's a major thrust of our tradition. Now, I need to make something clear here. While we encourage that, and while we provide resources and support and mentoring for people who really want to go seriously into that kind of work, we don't expect everybody to do that. And yet we do have a very important universal expectation, and that's love. And that's why I wanted to get to this heart thing, because we understand that love is not just a virtue among other virtues. We understand that love is not just a sentiment of affection. It's not just about attraction. Love at its divine level, well, in our Christian scriptures, we say that God is love, and those who live in love live in God and God in them. You hear that language that reflects exactly what Saint-Martin was saying: the heart of God entering me entering the heart of God. Those who love live in God and God lives in them. And so how anybody decides to wrap themselves in that principle, to immerse themselves in love and manifest more love in their life, we respect that. And for some people, they do that through service. I mean, it's all about helping their fellow human beings in very tangible ways. And for others of us, we express our love differently. We do it through this kind of contemplative, prayerful way that transforms us into servants of in different ways that we do our service in the world.
So could you expand a little bit on what you mean by service? Because I think service is something that will resonate with a lot of Masons, but is there a difference between just raising money or charitable causes and like the service you're talking about? I'm just wondering how much of a Venn diagram of overlap there is.
Yeah, that's a great question, because definitely anything that you do to help other human beings in a healthy way is a form of service. Anything that's done with a motivation of loving care and compassion is service, right? But Saint-Martin talked a lot about what he called the spirit man, or we might refer to it as the spirit person in today's language. A person who has grown so much in their spirituality that they now have the drive and the ability to help other people discover their connection with the divine, to realize that in their own life and have that transform them. And so that kind of service is something that is very important within the Martinist tradition. When a person becomes that third degree initiate within our tradition, we're saying we recognize you as someone who is ready to do that kind of service. And so we don't want to forget that. Now, how it works out for different people may be different. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul is attributed with talking about spiritual gifts. Well, one of the things we want people to do is to discover what are your spiritual gifts that will shape the way you serve. And that means it's going to be a little bit different from one person to another.
One thing that I find different in the Martinist groups is that we are there to not have all the answers, right, on our spiritual journeys, but more importantly, support each other in discovering the truth, right? And so that couldn't be as simple as an educational topic, or it could be as deeply personal as one-on-one mentoring, right? Really having what we've talked about in the past in Masonry, right? That mystic tie, that real hard, intimate connection in a safe space but more importantly, to explore what that reintegration, what coming back from the fall looks like. How are we living that every day? What's our journey like? How can we help and support each other? I think that's a really important aspect of what keeps the group organized and charged.
Yeah, this communal aspect of the thing is one of the things that I really like about Martinism. So on the one hand, we do emphasize that there's this internal private work that everybody has to do. But on the other hand, we emphasize that having a supportive community is vital to having the best experience of that personal journey. Now, this ties into another aspect of Martinist theory. This idea of reintegration, of reuniting, reharmonizing with the divine. We do that on an individual level through our prayer and through our contemplative practice and through meditation. But that needs to happen at a universal level. All of humanity must experience that for any individual to fully experience that. In a way, in a very real way, to me at least, this is a lot like the Bodhisattva tradition in Buddhism, that when someone takes the Bodhisattva vow in Buddhism, they vow that they will not enter nirvana until all sentient beings enter nirvana, which is really not as much a vow as like, I won't do that, as I realize I can't. That's not possible because we are all interconnected. Even though we fail to see it, we're ignorant of it because in our language of our fallen state, the fact is we are all interconnected. And so I can't fully reintegrate unless all of you dudes fully reintegrate. And so it's something that we have to work at together.
So I'm hearing it's not for ego-driven title chasers. That's what I'm hearing. That Martinism is not where you go for lapel pins and
how many lapel pins do you get?
And badges.
Yeah, I think it could be frustrating. If that's what you're looking for, I think you might be pretty frustrated in Martinism.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Well, I think I just wanted to add, Chuck. I mean, I loved your explanation of that, and that fits so well. And we were talking about in the side chat. I think Robert brought it up. If Freemasonry's slogan is "We take good men and we make them better," or "Be the change you want to see in the world," or "To be one, ask one," or whatever other thing shows up on a bumper
Take
sticker.
good men and make them bitter.
Yes. I mean, I think for me, you helped me sum up what Martinism's calling card is, and it's for me, it's essentially remember who we were, because we talk about reintegration or regeneration. So we're not creating something new. We are trying to go back and see what we lost, kind of like Freemasonry does. But to your point, it's a very individualized journey that you get to share with other folks. You know, that's the biggest difference for me. I treat my Martinism and my Freemasonry as two completely separate things, right? They're two different paths for me, honestly. And they don't intersect that much. But I think for me, that's what sums it up. And you help me to.
Well, let me jump off of that and say,
No,
well, then
no.
why? And this is for, it's fine. It's not for you. It's for Chuck then. Then why do we need Martinism in compared to your own personal religion or your own personal faith choice?
I'll go back to the communal aspect of that. That's an important part of it. We need that communal experience, right? If we've got an ultimate goal of all of humanity reintegrating with the divine, that starts with the individual, but then when it grows outward, it naturally reaches out into community. And a Martinist group, chapter, temple, heptad, whatever your particular order calls it, provides that first level of community, at which you can start to experience what that's like to be amongst other human beings that are working together toward reintegration. And that helps you then carry it out beyond that community in ways that we refer to as being an unknown. You don't have to go around proselytizing about Martinism to help others reintegrate, right? So, in a sense, Martinism isn't really necessary itself. It's just a vessel that holds these opportunities within it, and it has a kind of what we might call a spiritual momentum that it has built up through time to help with its egregore have effects on the people that join it. And I think that's an important point.
Robert.
So then I guess my my question, Chuck, I know we're getting short on time, is so like we have a bunch of different Martinist orders. Like why OM? And what, like, can you give us a little bit of insight into OM, the organization itself?
Yeah.
And it's not an us versus them thing, just looking
No,
for
it's
your
not.
perspective.
No, it isn't. I'm gonna make this a little more personal at this point because I was a free Martinist for many years,
Mm.
um, and what I was looking for was a very specific combination of things. I wanted to see an order that had a genuine understanding of the value of a contemplative life. I wanted to see an order that fully welcomed people of other faiths that didn't identify as Christians. I wanted to see an order that welcomed men and women equally, um, and uh, and I wanted to see an order in which the fraternal organizational side of things hadn't overwhelmed or doesn't overwhelm the the freedom of initiators and their groups to have their own egregore, their own atmosphere, their own special flavor. And I finally found that in the Order Martiniste. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in other Martinist orders. I'm just saying this is where I became aware of it. And it's also true that I already had some close friends within this order. Well, I've got close friends in other Martinist orders and other people in this order that I highly respect. Um, so those are all reasons for me that the Order Martiniste is important. And I'll throw in another one. Now, I'm not a big guy on lineages. I mean, as much as we make in Martinism of a kind of apostolic succession that goes back to Papoose, um, that's not as important to me as the spirit of the tradition. Yet, for me, there was an attraction to the fact that our order has such a direct and um, relatively short, in terms of the number of initiators, connection going back to that original attempt to formalize the tradition into an initiatic society.
Yeah, that's what we were showing there too with the list of the Grand Masters. Let me make sure I got my screen share. There we go. Right. So this is the lineage that one was, handed off succession to the next and to the next, and this was, for all intents and purposes, a lifelong appointment. And we might be getting a female Grand Master.
In fact, that is the plan.
As soon as what, May, I believe?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an exciting moment.
Yeah, so she will succeed Andre Goutier there, and that's exciting again for living out the values of it. Yes, these looks like a line of old white men, and then for a change, right, we're going to introduce a little bit more of that feminine spirit into that as well.
Yeah.
So not similar to Freemasonry at all.
Only took us how many hundreds of years?
But we got there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, great. Robert, you've been quiet. So what's been on your mind? Any questions for Chuck?
I think a lot of the questions I had really revolve around somebody who might be thinking, is Martinism something I want to look into? And I think you answered some of those questions very earnestly and respectfully, which, from my point of view, is this is a really special thing. And it's also not for somebody who isn't ready to do some real work. I think there's a lot of men out there who go, yeah, I'm all into that. And then when the rubber meets the road, it's more difficult, or they don't realize that you can skate by in something like, Martinist Order. And regardless of the Martinist tradition that you're a part of, I mean, there's MOOP, then they changed into Martinist Order America. There's OM. There's a number of Martinist fellowships out there. But yeah, I think the two biggest ones I am aware of are MOA and OM. But yeah, so nothing else for me. Just fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
really loved it.
At least in the U.S., right? Because I think like Martinism is a global order, very much like Freemasonry, but different branches and lineages are, more prevalent in certain areas.
I had, if you go back and check out the June 24 issue of the Knights Templar magazine, there was an interesting article kind of laying out an even deeper mind map. I was trying to find my copy here, but while I dig that up,
it was Ben Williams put that one together.
It was, yes,
and I think that caused a really interesting stir. I think there was people on the outside expected to see drama unfold with the article because of, oh my gosh, they're admitting something and it's there, and there's these different orders, and necessarily the people might think that just as in Masonry, it would be some sort of all things Masonic pissing match about lineage and this, that, and the other, when in fact every Martinist I've met from any and every single tradition could not care any less, provided the work is being done. I know Martinists from all, just like Chuck, many great brothers doing the work from many different traditions. But it was just funny to see people posting all about this like it was some sort of
expose
drama of the day. Oh my gosh, like it was the next CBCS thing, it was going to happen.
Pritchard's Martinism dissected.
Oh, that's funny.
All things Martinism.
I really want to pick up on this point by David that's on the screen now. Martinists are being more public, and I'll tell you, as an old timer these days, now I qualify as an old timer in Martinism. As an old timer in Martinism, it's taken me a long time to get comfortable with the idea of being public. But I'll tell you one of the reasons that I decided to do it. It's probably the biggest reason, is that it's happening anyway. And the genie is out of the bottle. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that the tradition is represented authentically. And there are a lot of sources on YouTube. For example, not to pick on YouTube, but that's where I'm going for my examples. There are a lot of examples on YouTube of videos claiming to provide information about Martinism that aren't really substantive, that are inaccurate in some of their details, and that don't offer the kind of broader, unbiased perspective that we've been trying to offer here tonight. And so we have a responsibility. Some of us have to step forward to say, look, this, from someone who's been doing this a long time, this is the authentic tradition. And not to pick on Freemasonry too much, but that's something that Freemasonry lost as it became more public.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because I think it's been implied, but it's also now said that in general, like, you don't go outing people because everything we've talked about so far in the past hour has been, this is an internal process, it's an internal journey. It's not for me or anyone else to say so and so is doing this Martinist thing, because that's their path, right?
Yeah.
And so it is a huge faux pas to go out and label someone as a Martinist. And so, but to the opposite point that we were just talking about, that for those in leadership positions and those who want to take that active role in their, I'd say their faith plus their involvement in this fraternity, it's becoming more of a thing, because I think the timing is right as well. I would agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting hearing all these perspectives tonight. I would say I'm kind of on the early side of a true Christian mystical journey. And so this is definitely one of those things that I want to keep learning about and want to keep researching as I move forward.
Yeah, Jason, I'm really glad you said that, because, before I was a Martinist, I had a lot of years already in practical esotericism. A lot of years. And it was in my own spiritual development that I was led back to Christianity, and particularly Christian mysticism. And I started reading, the classic Christian mystic texts, and fell in love with it. I fell in love with Christianity again. I started experiencing aspects of Christianity at a much deeper level than I ever had before. And it was at that time that someone said, "Hey, have you ever thought about Martinism?" And the student was ready. and so this is one of the things that I want our listeners here tonight to understand, is that if you really identify with Christian mysticism in a way that isn't about excluding other people, but embracing other people in love, but you really identify with Christian mysticism and you want that environment and that experience, here we are.
That's awesome. I think it's a good time to plug the lineage. Like, how would you find that group or that organization? That would be Martinism-USA.com. That's your and my lineage.
Yes.
And yeah, so if you land on this webpage here somewhere, where did I find it? There it is. Yeah, you'll resolve to something like that. Then there is a way that you can learn more, read some more. Don't take my word for it, but certainly dig deeper. And I think you can start to find a group near you. And there's new groups being formed all the time. it's certainly a growing organization, which I'm excited about as well.
Yeah, on that note, it's also important to say that we're not growing for the sake of growth.
What?
Yeah, yeah. This is something that happens in esoteric orders a lot of times. They start getting caught up in the thrill of growth, and it actually winds up undermining the spiritual core of their tradition, and then everything splinters apart.
Yeah.
And our leadership is working to support growth without letting it run wild, and making sure that we're, really keeping that inner commitment as an order to the work as we grow.
I love it. Okay, so this is great. Let's start to wrap things up. One last call for Robert or Jason. I think you guys have said your piece, but wanted to give you another option to thank Chuck and give me just final thoughts.
Thank you to Chuck for everything you do, not just this, but also to John and Joe for talking a little bit about something that moves them deeply, and it's just really awesome to see. So thank you guys so much for sharing, especially in light of the world we live in, and we need more good out there, and I think this is definitely one of those organizations that provides those things, and it's great.
So Chuck, what didn't we ask you that you had planned on talking about tonight, or would you wish that we would have covered?
I really think we hit all of the points that were important to me. What I'm going to close with is returning to love as being something that's much bigger than any of us can really comprehend, and that's the thing that is the real transformative power in existence, and we need to embrace that to fulfill all of our potentials as children of the divine.
It's beautiful. I guess I'll thank you again, Chuck, for coming on. Thank you for outing yourself and sharing your skills, your abilities. I guess just a great person that you are. Again, couldn't have found a better fit to lead in this organization and to share that with our audience. So we appreciate you. You're welcome back anytime for any other reason.
Thank you. I would love to come back.
Great. That as for me, closing it up, my spiritual journey has grown and shaped over the years, and I'm learning more and more all the time. And yet, Martinism has certainly been a life-changing part of my faith, my journey, my struggles, my introspection, and it's such a great complement to Freemasonry, to my faith, to my family, and it's so I've certainly I can't get enough of it, and I think Chuck said it really well. Like, it all comes down to love, and to paraphrase something we heard many years ago, the one thing that I'd like to say is, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So for that, I want to thank you all very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.
Wow.